Welcome back. It's David Wildstein. I'm the editor of the New Jersey Globe. Dr. Steve Adubato is the Emmy Award-winning anchor of two highly regarded public television shows and a third show also highly regarded on News 12. He's the author of Lessons in Leadership. Dr. Adubato, welcome.
David, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well. Good to hear from you. I want to talk to you a little bit about leadership. It's one of your areas of expertise, and I should begin by talking about your dad, Big Steve, as a lot of us called him, and I know you miss him. We all do. He was an extraordinary person, and again, I'm sorry for your loss this year.
I appreciate that. In fact, David, you may not realize this, but one of the first times I met you, it was with my dad. You're actually talking with him in, quote-unquote, the back room where he had many of his meetings, and you were there as a very young man. Same thing on my end. And it's so interesting how things play out.
It is. And he was a legendary figure in Newark politics and across the state. So he had to be one of your earliest role models for what leadership means.
Well, it's interesting in this way as well, David, because in my book, Lessons in Leadership, I dedicated it to my dad and wrote about him in the introduction. I said everything about leadership I did learn from my dad, and that includes how to motivate people, how to be tough, how to set standards, how to challenge yourself to be better by never accepting the status quo. But I also wrote in the book that, as you well know, my dad could be tough, he could be mean at times, and he, in many ways, taught me how not to handle difficult situations. We just had very different styles, but he accomplished a great deal.
Yeah, and we all miss him. And in your book, you were talking about your book. I know you talked about the need for leaders to display empathy. And one of the things I noticed recently is a former Trump campaign official. He recently said that the president would have won re-election if he had just displayed a little bit of empathy for those whose lives had changed during the pandemic. Do you agree with that?
So here's the thing. It's so interesting. So many of my friends who voted for President Trump will often say, I don't really care about his personality. I don't care that he could be nasty and call people names. He's got a great record. The economy is doing really well, the stock market, et cetera, et cetera. I get that. But here's the thing, David, and you know this very well. When so many people were sick and dying and scared to death of this pandemic then and now, and the president seemed to focus too much of the attention on himself and his enemies, whether he's tweeting or out there giving a speech, I never really sensed a tremendous degree of compassion and empathy for those who were suffering, who did lose family members. It's like, open up the economy. Yes, of course, but that has to be balanced against a whole range of other issues regarding our safety. I never sensed that the president communicated that, and the last thing I'll say is this. I often, in my leadership seminars, tell people, I can teach you how to present more effectively. I can teach you how to run a better meeting, how to motivate others. I cannot teach you to actually care about other people. I'm not convinced that President Trump cared that much or cares that much about other people other than himself.
And that probably would have changed, in some of these very close states. It probably would have affected the outcome. And you talk about not caring about others or caring about others. Right now in Washington, I guess as we're speaking, there's a battle over a pandemic relief package. It would extend unemployment benefits and deliver another round of stimulus checks. As a leadership expert, why can't Washington get this done?
In the series that we've just kicked off, it's a mini-series on public broadcasting called Democracy at a Crossroads. This is it right here. Everyone, I had Congressman Mikey Sherrill on, and this weekend, and along with former New York Governor David Patterson, and I asked them about democracy at a crossroads. And on one hand, they both said, we're always at a crossroads. Democracy is always facing these challenges. But this is different. Because when in our nation's history can you have members of Congress, yes, they disagree with each other. Yes, they have different parties, different ideologies. But when people are suffering, and they're playing games down in Washington trying to figure out who they can blame. Can the Democrats blame Mitch McConnell? Can Mitch McConnell say that it's Nancy Pelosi? The games that they're playing around blame and who gets credit is so unconscionable at a time like this when so many people are suffering, not just from the pandemic in terms of health, but in terms of small businesses, in terms of people who can't pay their rent, who can't pay their mortgage, who can't pay for a kid to go to college. That is horrific, and that's why I say we're at a different kind of crossroads in our democracy. because never have I seen this much polarization, divisiveness, and an insensitivity to people's suffering in an effort to score cheap political points to this degree.
And I'm speaking with Emmy Award-winning anchor Steve Adubato on the New Jersey Globe Power Hour. Dr. Adubato, so you look at Governor Murphy's leadership of New Jersey in 2020, and I guess that will be there will be a referendum next year as he seeks re-election. How do you rate his handling of the pandemic?
So it's interesting. First of all, please, David, as we know each other too long, call me Steve, because in my own house, my kids often remind me that, quote, I'm not a real doctor, that a PhD is somehow not being a real doctor, and I'm sure Dr. Jill Biden understands that as well. But as for Governor Murphy. And
by the way, your dad taught me to always call somebody by their title, so I'm not sure which one of you I'm going to agree with, but I'm a little old to change my habits.
David, you ready? He never called me doctor. That's all I'm going to tell you. He called me other things, but WABC is a family station, and I'm not going there.
Fair enough.
But these are my thoughts on Governor Murphy. First of all, no one could have imagined, whether it's Governor Cuomo or President Trump or Governor Murphy, that this horrific pandemic was something they had to deal with. The kind of decisions they have to make about restaurants, about bars, about gyms, about schools. These are life and death decisions. These are people who are struggling economically, whose safety is at risk, and you've got to make those calls. I believe the governor overall has been reasonable and fair and tried to make the best decision possible. Has he made some real mistakes? Absolutely. And when I had a one-on-one interview with him, you can check out on our website at steveadubato.org, the interview I did with him, I said, Governor, clearly a mistake around the nursing homes. Clearly did not handle that well, and the same thing is true for Governor Cuomo in that regard. And I'll say this, even though I respect the governor a lot, he did blame that on the nursing homes. And at no point did I sense that he was taking responsibility for decisions that his Department of Health made, which I believe, in retrospect, it was a mistake. And I'm not a fan, particularly from a leadership point of view. Even if the nursing homes were in part responsible, my thing is the old Harry Truman rule, the buck stops here, which is a sign he had on his desk. I don't like the move that says the buck stops anywhere but with me. And I see that too much, and I see a little bit in Governor Murphy, even though overall I give him a solid B.
And, one of the things that we talk about is it's a tough state to govern, and it seems to be tougher for a Democrat than for a Republican.
Why do you say that, David? For a Democrat.
I say this sometimes jokingly, but I really, I don't, not completely as a joke. I think New Jersey is very much a vibrant two-party state. I'm just not so sure the Republicans are one of those two parties.
I knew you were going.
Yeah.
And to David's point, and he knows politics better than most and analyzes it, and that's why he gets the numbers right in a Republican convention as to who's going to be the chairman or the chair of the party. And I'll say this, there are at least two Democratic parties in New Jersey. And let's just say that the, quote, progressive far left part of the party or the left-leaning far left part of the party that Governor Murphy is part of, that's one party, and it's strong. But I'll say this, there is the Steve Sweeney, president of the Senate, George Norcross down in the Camden area, Democratic Party boss. They are middle-of-the-road folks. They lean a little bit more to the right, and ideologically, philosophically, they don't really believe in a lot of the same things, even though there's a D after their names. At least two Democratic parties in New Jersey, and so they fight amongst each other, and the Republicans watch.
That's just the way it is. Well,
except for when Chris Christie was governor for 8 years.
Dr. Steve Adubato, or Steve, I'm looking forward to watching democracy at a crossroads. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you again for joining me.
Thank you, and the Power Hour, the NJ Globe Power Hour, is in fact, and you don't need my promotion, but I'll just say it, is must listening to on WABC. You learn an awful lot. Great job, David.
Thank you so much. Thank you.